Hello everybody, and welcome to this spelunking adventure of Top Deck Thoughts. My name is Jordan Leroy Hansen, also known as LevDev, and I hope you all are having a lovely day. Now, before we get started, let's just get the elephant out of the room. You might notice that this mouth is a little bit off when doing my pronunciations and such. That's because, due to a recent ear infection, I actually got diagnosed with Bell's palsy. Lucky enough, I'm under medicine, I'm recovering from it, and it's actually doing really good recovery from what it was previously. But I do apologize in advance if it's a little bit off. My bad. Just a pinched nerve, essentially. So, nevertheless, for this Top Deck Thoughts, we're actually going to be going spelunking and talk about my top 10 personal favorite cards of Caverns of Ixalan. So far, the set looks amazing. There's a bunch of cool new dinosaurs, vampires, merfolk, even fungus, a variety of cool cards, even some like crafting. Pretty much anything in the realm of cavern exploration you expect in this set. Now, before we get started, we're going to talk about my honorable mentions. And honestly, I'm going to use the honorable mentions this time around to actually talk about the reprints. We have actually got a lot of good reprints in this set. We got Resplendent Angel. We got Gishath. We got even Growing Lights of Itlamok. We even got one of the better reprints, technically, which is Cavern of Souls, reprinted into Standard yet again, and now also reprinted into Pioneer. There's a bunch of good reprints, and that's not even talking about how the set booster cards actually have exclusive guest lists, kind of like the special guest cards, which in themselves have a bunch of good reprints, such as, for example, like the good old 1212 Galta. There's also, for example, Myriad Duelist. There's even Lord of Atlantis. And of course, the main one that everybody wants to try to pull is the Mana Crypt, which, yeah, $200 card, completely understandable. But even then, even in the list proportion that's not the special guest, they actually added a bunch of good new cards on the list this time around, like Dotside Distortionist, Expert Sentinel. Just the reprints in this set that's both provided by the main set itself, as well from the special guests, as well as the quote-unquote list slot in the set boosters. I do feel like that's a very honorable mention for our top 10 Caverns of Ixalan. For now, though, let's actually get to the new cards and see what is my top 10 cards. Shall we?
Number 10.
Number 10 on this list, and this one I'm going to be cheating just a little bit, but the basic summary that I'm going to say is, well, caves. In this set, there's been a subsection of cards that are a new land type, which is the cave land type, as well as there's a certain subsection of cards that also interact and synergize with caves. Anyone who ever messed with Ravnica, as well as essentially Baldur's Gate deck archetypes, you kind of get the basic shtick here. We have essentially a common cycle of caves. We even have some uncommon caves. We even have a rare cave that's actually really good. We even have the one that will be on the number 10 slot for caves, which is Spelunking, a very powerful enchantment that allows us to play additional lands to pretty much ramp, as well as make our lands enter and untap, which is a very powerful effect, essentially. Never underestimate being able to make a tap land, being able to untap. But overall, I do think Caves has a pretty good chance. We got a lot of good new tools. We got a lot of good ramp already in Standard in general. I do think Caves has a shot. There's just a lot of fun shenanigans you can brew around it. So number 10 on the list, Caves.
Number 9.
Number 9 on this list, and that is Warden of the Sky. Now this one drop kind of looks a little anticlimactic at first glance. It's like, oh, sure, it's kind of cool that once it gets free counters, it becomes essentially a Sarah Angel, more or less. But I have to tap down free creatures to essentially get a counter and scry on it? That seems a little slow. Like, what deck that can possibly get free creatures or free artifacts on the battlefield really quick? Oh, hey, Boros Convoke. I haven't seen you there. So yeah, this is a card that just got last minute add on the list because honestly, I slept on it, and then I actually played with the card, both in limited as well as just some potential constructed during the early access on my own private time. And I'm just gonna say it, this card is legit the bee's knees. Like, it is actually surprisingly easy to get counters on this thing because, like, we have a bunch of spells already in standard to put counters on stuff without much relative stress, so it can easily become Sour Angel without much sweat. And even the activated ability is actually not that hard to activate, especially when you consider that there's popular artifacts like the Ozlift, specifically the green Ozlift in standard, which, you know, you can tap that down, as well as just tap down another 1-drop or 2-drop you have, and then, oh, by the way, now you put 2 counters on the ward of the first guy, and it's just like, ugh. And then there's also the fact that we have the Kodrofa essentially make free Goblin spell, so it's going to be really, really easy in those Kodrofa Mischief decks that essentially is part of the Boros Convoke passage to easily get the free creatures or free artifacts to tap down to essentially activate the Scry ability as well as the counter ability. Just a very strong 1-drop. Don't sleep on this. This is probably going to be a very good card in some specific aggro / mid-range brews. Number 8 on this list, I gotta put my main favorite Planeswalker that essentially recently became a Planeswalker from March of Machines. We gotta talk about Quintorius Gone. This is a very strong Boros-based Planeswalker. That static effect is ridiculously silly, considering how many things that we can play from Exile currently in Standard in general. I'm talking about stuff like Adventures. I'm even talking about Reckless Impulse. Like, the amount of rounds of Impulsive Draw that we have currently in Standard can make this static effect, which essentially does a mini lightning heal, it's essentially, more or less, makes it a very strong card. The +1 is also pretty good, just being able to make a free 2 token. Very nice. Helps even synergize with Quintorius from March of the Machine, so since you can sacrifice that token for its activated ability effect, which is actually kind of sweet. And of course, the Discover 4. Discover is a very strong mechanic. Now, granted, it is kind of a slightly balanced version of Cascade, but still, this is a pretty strong effect, being able to Discover 4 and then discover into like a Depopulate, or even a powerful 3 or 2-drop creature to help protect your Quintorius. Very strong. And of course, if you can get to the ultimate in the right deck design, that could be a game-winning play, just being able to exile all your 1-mana shock spells and then just get all the red mana to boom, 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 and then do all the lightning heal at static effect triggers, can easily finish off the game. So far, I can't wait to brew around Quintorius. Quintorius was fun to play during the early access in its Discover Storm brew, and I just can't wait to see all the decks I can actually put this fine Elephant Planeswalker in. Can't wait to see their future shenanigans within the story.
7.
Number 7 on the list, and this one is still one of my personal favorite cards on this list, and that's got to be the Grim Captain's Throne, as well as transform into the Grim Captain. Now, for those who don't know, this is actually a callback to essentially Call the Grim Captain, or the Grim Captain's Call, which was a 3-mana sorcery spell in the original Ixalan, which essentially was a regrow variant where you return all of the 4 creature types that are mentioned within this card, specifically a pirate, dinosaur, merfolk, and a vampire. So, I do love that this is a nice callback to that, and this is actually kind of like a fun brewing challenge, where essentially it's like, at its front, you just get essentially a self-mill card, which is actually not bad, considering that one of the mechanics in this set is Descent, which we want to actually get permanent cards into our graveyard that trigger Descent, which is actually kind of a cool way to synergize with the effect. And of course, Reanimator always likes to self-mill themselves to get their next Reanimator target to essentially be able to be reanimated. That's just without a sweat, essentially. But even then, if we can brew our deck right, we can get essentially craft with a dinosaur, merfolk, pirate, and vampire to make a ridiculously powerful Grim Captain. A 7/7, hexproof, menace, just all the keywords that it has on there, as well as the ability that when you attack, your opponent has to sacrifice a permanent, as well as essentially you get one of those creatures you craft with it onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. That can lead to ridiculously absurd shenanigans. I'm gonna have some fun doing some drink brewing around the throne of the Grim Captain. This is just a ridiculously fun card.
Number 6.
Number 6 on the list, and this is... It seems weird how we now went back-to-back with top 10 lists where we have essentially a Termagori variant, but here we go. Number 6 on the list is Souls of the Lost. Now, this card in a self-mill deck can get scary really quick. Sure, it's just stats, but there is a lot of easy ways to mill like up to 15 cards in your own library in Standard and keep it specifically permanent-based deck design. So Souls of the Lost can get chunky really, really quick. And we have enough fleeing variants in the format as well as just ways to give it evasion that I do think that this is going to be a pretty significant threat within the Standard format. So get your graveyard hate ready. We're going to see a lot of Soul of the Lost, if I'm being quite frankly honest. Number 5 on our list, and actually one of the first dinosaurs that are on the list, and that has to be the Bone Horde Dracosaur. This card, as a 5-drop dragon dinosaur, or dinosaur dragon, is just a ridiculously absurd mana card. You get all those, you get flying, you get the first strike, which is ridiculously absurd. You also get the exile card draw impulse at the beginning of your upkeep. And even then, with that exile card draw, you also get either 3-1 dinosaur tokens, or you just get treasures, which helps you ramp into casting the spells that you exile, which is just... this is a ridiculously absurd Magic card. I think a lot of people are going to have fun with it. Yeah, you have to wait a turn to quote-unquote for it to get its effect. I know. Look, you have to do the same thing for Shieldred, and we all don't complain about that. So yeah, it's safe to say that I do think the Bone Horde Dracosaur is going to see some play, at least in a couple formats, at least Commander without a sweat, but I would be surprised if it doesn't see some Standard play. Number 4, we actually go to another dinosaur, and this is probably one that we'll see Standard play without a sweat, and that is the Trumpeting Carnosaur. It's a 6-mana 7/6 with Trample, which is absurd enough, but even then, you just get the mana rebate with the Discover 5 ETB trigger, which, by the way, you can flicker to repeat the Discover trigger, which is going to be relevant with also Geological Appraiser in the format, so just something to keep in mind. So yeah, ridiculously absurd with that, but just the factor that you just get a 7/6 with Trample that's going to have a discount thanks to the Discover 5 that at worst it's going to draw you a card, or be a removal spell, or if you're playing in the dinosaur deck, you can play with the 5-drop Polani's Hatcher, get the Polani's Hatcher, and then now automatically give the Trumpeting Carnosaur haste. Or even just discover into removal without remove a problematic creature that will allow you to be able to attack it with the Trumpeting Carnosaur. There's just a lot of absurd shenanigans you can do with this card. And also, just even without that, if it's a dead card in your hand, you can also just channel it and just essentially use it to deal free damage to a target creature or planeswalker, which is a very strong effect. Being able to get a removal spell on your late game threat, so if you draw it early, you can use it for removal, which then you can also reanimate, so keep that in mind. So yeah, Trumpeting Carnosaur, very strong card. I would be dumbfounded if it doesn't see play in Standard. Number 3 on the list, and this one I'm actually going to go a little off tangent here, but actually going to put the couple on the list, which in this case is Saheeli as well as Huatli on the list. Now, let's go a little off tangent with kind of like my Vorthos kind of nerd talking. It's actually kind of a pleasant surprise to actually see both of these characters that are a couple within the set. I thought that they were essentially WotC as well as the narrative department, which is going to do the cliche of, oh, due to the whole Omen Path things and Planeswalkers losing their spark, that Saheeli and Huatli is going to be separated, and they're going to have to find each other and just, like, prolong the narrative. But it's a pleasant surprise to just go to Ixalan and be like, oh, hey, Saheeli's there, hanging out with her girlfriend. So, for the Sapphic enjoyers of the world, they probably got pretty much a good kick to see this lovely couple being able to be in the set together, as well as being together within the story. So, chef's kiss on that. As for the cards themselves, these are very strong cards. First of all, we're going to start with one of my favorite, which is the new Saheeli. This is essentially a balanced Kiki-Jiki and a slightly not balanced Kiki-Jiki, because one of the things to keep in mind is you can, with the new Saheeli, copy any creature with the activated ability, That's including legendary creatures, which that means you can, within the Common Color cycle, or any legendaries that you want to get an extra copy to die. Kind of like, for example, as I mentioned before, the Kamigawa Dragons, but also Ratadrabic is also another example. So being able to make a secondary legendary copy for that type of combo shenanigans in general is actually really nice. And also, there is just ways to being able to have this in your commander zone. There are just ways you can go infinite with this in commander. Intruder Alarm, etc., etc. Like, I'm pretty sure that a bunch of commander players have already talked about the infinite combos with this. Now, we also talk about Huatli. Huatli also is a very strong card as well. Being able to get the land fetch ability from the ETB, it's like very basic, but it's a nice basic. It's kind of like one of those scenes where you always appreciate the free drops that allow you to get a land drop to help you fix your mana within commander decks. That's actually really nice. And then, of course, the backside saga is the most powerful aspect of the card. If you can flip it and get to the saga side, it is absurd. Being able to get the tokens, being able to get the ramp, being able to get the tutor for the dinosaurs, and then make all your dinosaurs essentially have double strike and trample, which is just like a finisher in itself. So, yeah, number 3 on the list, it's gotta be the couple. Without a sweat.
Number 2.
Number 2 on this list, and this one I knew was going to be on the list as soon as I saw it from MagicCon, essentially in MagicCon Vegas, and it's gotta be Breaches. Breaches is just one of my probably favorite powerful cards of the set, personally. Just, there's a lot of good stuff that's going on with this card. Just being able to be a free with first strike, relevant. It's also just a goblin, which is irrelevant, and a pirate, which is also relevant. But also the fact that when you're able to attack with any pirates, you get those triggered abilities. Either exiling top card, make a creature unblockable, essentially, more or less, or technically make a creature not being able to block, or just create a treasure token. That's ridiculously absurd in a pirate-based brew, and even by itself, even if Breaches is the only pirate that you have on the battlefield, just being able to attack into Breaches and activate any of those abilities that are relevant within your mid-range archetype, ridiculously absurd. So, I would say, without a sweat, my personal favorite powerful card is Breaches, but there is one more powerful card than that. And that would be...
Number 1.
My number 1 card of Caverns of Ixalan. And this one is a no-brainer. Honestly, it's gotta be... I mean, there's the easy answer, which is the whole Restless Land cycle for some content creators. There's even some that's going to be the quote-unquote good removal we have in the set, such as, for example, the Get Lost, the Molten Collapse, and such. Like, that's going to be, so for many people, their number 1 card. But to me, my personal number 1 card from this set, it's got to be the Roaming Throne. The Roaming Throne is just an absurd magic card when you actually look at it closely. A 4-mana 4/4 with Ward 2 that has, when it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. And then anytime you get a triggered ability of the creature type that's been selected, you copy it. That is a ridiculously absurd powerful ability. Note to self, Ward is a triggered ability too, so if you have 2 copies of this on the battlefield and they both have the same creature type, they both trigger off each other's Ward, so they essentially more or less have Ward 4. But also, this is just a ridiculously strong card in any typo/kindred-based deck design in general. Like, let's think about this for a minute. Dinosaurs. Now, with Gishap, those combat damage trigger with Gishap, that triggers twice. Let's think about, like, goblins like Mutzes, for example. That ATB trigger triggers twice. Or even, like, with a recent card we talked about, with Polani's Hatcher that's in the set. Oh, you can actually... Turn 4, play the Throne, and in turn 5, play Polani's Hatcher, which not only is going to give you 4 eggs rather than 2 eggs, but also, due to the beginning of the combat ability, since that's a triggered ability, is now going to give you 2 free dinosaurs with haste. And I can keep going with this. Like, there's a lot of creature types that have triggered abilities that are very, very strong, that being able to double their triggers is going to lead to a bunch of variety shenanigans in a variety of formats, in my personal opinion. So, without a doubt, my number one card from Caverns of Ixalan, it has to be the Roman Throne. And nevertheless, that is my top 10 cards of Caverns of Ixalan. I hope you endured, like I said, my face being a little bit off due to the Bell's palsy. Nevertheless, thanks for all who enjoyed my top 10. I hope you all have a lovely day. As I say, hooray! Yay!